a quick summary of Viking era, which you probably have heard of, to Swedish Empire. Like what happened in between, and how did they go from Vikings to Gustavus's time, which we'll talk about him in a bit. So the main word, if I had to summarize it in one word, Christianization. So it began around 800. So this is like, Anglo-Saxon England era, pre-William the Conqueror, all this kind of stuff. We're going a long time ago, right? 800, finished 1200. So 400 years it took to turn Sweden Christian. So how does that happen, right? How do they go from Vikings worshipping Thor to a Christian kingdom worshipping Jesus? Well, missionaries, basically. So they were being sent from about 800 onwards. They were founding churches, baptizing converts. They secured permission to preach, which wasn't always successful. King Olaf Skutenung, I hope I said that right, I practiced it. King Olaf Skutenung was the first baptized king, and then from there it just got easier. So Sweden ended up transitioning from fragmented petty kingdoms into a unified Christian monarchy, right? And this was, as I said, around 1200. So then, what happened? Well, there were crusades into Finland, because Sweden gradually annexed Finland through church-backed campaigns to turn them Christian as well. And then pretty much for the rest of this time span, Finland has just been part of Sweden. So every time we mention Sweden for the rest of this video, we're also talking about Finland, because it was all just one entity until not even that long ago. It's traded hands between Sweden and Russia so many times, but generally it's just been part of Sweden. There was something called the Kalmar Union, which is Sweden, Norway, and Denmark coming together, and it was ruled by Denmark. So it's, of course, like as I said, includes Finland because it's part of Sweden. Then in 1520, so not far behind the timeline we're about to start talking about, a Danish king massacred a bunch of Swedish nobles. There was a rebellion. A guy called Gustav Vasa, also Gustav I, he became king of an independent Sweden. And super importantly, this is when they become Protestant. As I said, I'm not much of a religious guy, but I did. It turns out religion, super important for European history. Like Catholic, Protestant, it's a big deal, right? Which one you are. So yeah, these guys become Protestant. From here, they become a regional power. There were wars with Russia, Poland, and Denmark, and just basically just consider that there's just constantly wars with either Russia, Poland, and or Denmark, which is Denmark and Norway for the rest of this time period as well. It's the same entity. So yeah, with that summary, I'll hand over to you, Rob, to tell us more about the man that was Gustavus. This is Gustav II, and the beginning of this empire, 1611. Why is this guy so epic?
All right, so I'm actually going to go more about his starting, kind of what happened when he took the throne. So if you want to just let's just show a picture of the man himself. So
handsome fella.
Also, he was a handsome fella. I mean, especially because you see some kings around this period. You see, this period later, there'd been some minor inbreeding. That doesn't make a good-looking man, But this guy was, he had it going on, and so I found evidence
going on. Gustav's mom. Let's go. Go on.
One of the highest proportions of like busts and statues of him. I could find 15 notable ones. That was like notable ones that are presented in cities and things like that. On top of there'll be other minor ones in places, but 15 that I could find of him around different towns, cities, not even just in Sweden. So I've got a few on the page here. I've got a few examples of busts and statues. Sometimes they're intertwined with other people, but these are I thought 4 of the cooler ones that I put on the screen for you guys.
Yeah, he's a striking fella.
Yeah, a hell of a beard choice. I guess maybe it's for the time, but
I quite like it, man. Look at that stash. Yeah. It's one of those, for those of you watching, it's like one of those sort of thin, long ones that curl up on the side. Not quite like villain, like cartoon villains. It's like very twirly.
It's thick. It's thicker than a villain one. I'd say. The villain one would be a bit thinner and a bit more evil looking, whereas this one's a bit more
very blonde. Probably unsurprising given he's a Swede.
Yeah, I can imagine as well for paintings, it was kind of almost darkened to get it easier to paint. I can imagine quite a light color was even harder against the
skin. Get some shadow in there.
Yeah. So because when his dad Charles IX died is when he took the throne. So he was 16 when he took the throne, and which is technically too young, even though there hadn't even been a Swedish monarchy independent from the Union for that long. But apparently it was waived almost immediately. It was basically when, I think, because he showed almost immediately he was competent, so they just went, okay, we'll waive this kind of precedent of that you can't be. I found really conflicting ages. I either found it was either 25 or 18 he had to be. But he was 16, but I couldn't find a clear answer, which you think would be easier to find. Maybe someone can tell us whether it was 25 or 18.
I just didn't know he was. I didn't know he started so young. Yeah, it's pretty epic.
He had a few he had some good support in place. He had another younger guy. I actually forgot his name. I didn't write it down, but he had basically his another one of his council was a very important member who kind of guided him, led him, and kind of helped in that kind of early years, because he didn't immediately take over and go I dominate every war he's in, dominates kind of everything he did. He took some licks at the start. So when he took the throne in Sweden, they were poor and weak militarily, so the country was not in a good state. I mean, they were at war with Denmark/Norway, which is that's one country, Denmark-Norway. They broke off with the Tsardom of Russia and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. So the one I took a bit more interest in was actually one that may seem like a really minor war, but the Russian War wasn't actually technically what you call an important war, but the impact was really large because it allowed them to gain. That was the one they did really well. They suffered heavily versus Denmark-Norway, and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was a bit of a back and forth, but they did really well against the Tsardom of Russia, and that allowed them to get control over the Baltic Sea. So if you're not aware, for the Baltic Sea is the sea to the east of Sweden.
Yeah, it's like in between that
Russia
kind of,
and Sweden.
Yeah, that Sweden, Finland part above Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, modern day countries. It's like a little body of water there.
Absolutely, and so the reason this is important because if you control the Baltic Sea, you control trade in the region. So that was what allowed their economy to be rebuilt. It's basically getting control back of the Baltic Sea from Russia. So he was really strong militarily and economically. And I feel like one of the things I found interesting is he says he listed the characteristics of a good commander: virtue, knowledge, caution, authority, and luck.
All right. Huh. There you go. Wise man.
Wise man. So that's the formative years of Gustavus.
Yeah, I would also throw in here, I'm going to grab a segment from my later 30 Years War segment, just to talk about here, just because we're talking about how cool and great he is and how successful he was. But just to be clear, as Rob was saying, he ended up building the Swedish Empire and its territories by winning so many wars, and he had a lot of military reforms. So I'm kind of cannibalizing off my later part here to explain this, but he had a ton of military reforms, and some of them are like having a standing army, whereas most people around this time, most entities had peasants that they would kind of call up to fight. He changed. People used to fight in formations called tercios. He sort of changed that system a little bit because he learned a lot of lessons in his fights with the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and he sort of he learned a lot of stuff. He put a lot of things into action. They were well-trained soldiers, and generally he was called, I think some people, he's referred to as the father of modern warfare, which I think is a hell of a title. That's a hell of a title.
One of the relevance in Age of Empires 3 is they have a home city. So I thought then it'd be good to see what the changes that happened to Stockholm during this time, and the kind of the impacts of the rise of the Swedish Empire on the city of Stockholm. So the city of Stockholm, it had a massive population boom in the period of the rise of the Swedish Empire. So in about 70 years, the population rose from 10k to 50k. So that's a 500%, 5 times increase. It was massive city boom.
That sounds huge. I mean, I'm not too familiar with population numbers and maybe how normal that is, but that doesn't sound like it's normal.
So a modern equivalent, I guess, is Milton Keynes. So Milton Keynes, which is in UK, if you don't know, is something they call a new city. They built it. They almost built loads of housing, convinced people to arrive. But that was more, they're convincing people from all around to arrive. And that went from about 10k to 60k in 50 years. And that's in the modern era of them trying to advertise it and them this is 10k to 50k in 70 years, which is slightly less, but without that kind of impact of
that's mad,
of all they're doing in the kind of the modern world we can do with things that. So, but one last thing about it is it became the really center of the trade. So all trade in essence came through for this region, came through there. So it between 1635 and 1642, it increased by 438% the city income. For 7 years, 438% income increase.
That is pretty crazy, yeah. And I think I remember reading in some of my research as well that Someone might tell me I'm wrong here, but this Swedish Empire is the only entity which has managed to control the entire Baltic Sea, like for hundreds, 200, whatever years. It's a kind of span of time, and that's really quite impressive because you have to think. You know what? Let's jump ahead. We're going to butcher the order. Can you go down a couple pictures to the one that I was going to show when I was talking about the Second Great Northern War? Yeah, go back one. Yeah, we're jumping ahead here. We're jumping ahead. But for those of you watching, I'm showing a map, right? And you can see there's certain places are coloured green, and it's part of the Swedish Empire. And this is at their peak. So there's Sweden, there's Finland, there's parts of Norway, there's a little bit under Denmark and parts of northern Germany, and there's parts of like modern day like Estonia and Latvia. And so this whole sort of shape, and of course all like along the coast, it might not look large on the world map, but you have to think that's a lot of coastline. That's a lot of surface area of coastline, which means there's a lot of towns, a lot of cities, and therefore that is a lot of trade all happening within one empire, you know? A lot of intra-empire trade. So it's just getting wealthier and wealthier. It's actually a big part.
And that's the thing of this period. It's not your money earned is the biggest thing is trade. Trade is what develops wealth, especially because it's taxes on trade. It's just if trade comes through your dock, everything will be taxed.
Yeah, so
that's it. That is free. It's I'd like to call it free money because they've arrived, they give you money, and they also bring you things which they want to sell. It's a win-win.
The Holy Roman Empire at this time is fractured internally. It's a bunch of principalities with autonomy. So we're talking Germanic states here, essentially. And they're ruled on paper by the Austrian Habsburgs. So the Austrian Habsburgs are, the emperors of the Holy Roman Empire, and they're a big sort of royal family, and they even have they're the Spanish Habsburgs as well. So they're related. And so they're quite they hold quite a bit of power. But as I said, in the Holy Roman Empire, very fractured. There's been a ton of wars already about Catholics and Protestants leading up to this. But at this period of time, at the start of this war, there was peace, and it can be summarized with this quote: "Whose realm, their religion." Seems pretty good to me. It basically just means, each principality can rule whichever way they want. Sounds reasonable, but I can tell you that they weren't particularly happy about this, right? Like, they weren't happy that the Catholics had a Protestant neighbor, or Protestants had a Catholic neighbor, But at least there was peace, and the people could just get on with their lives. However, when someone called Ferdinand II became emperor, this started to change. So I'll summarize his position with a quote from him: "I would rather rule a desert than a state full of heretics." Being a Catholic himself, you can imagine this meant bad news for Protestants. So he started closing Protestant churches, and there was a situation where Protestants threw some royal officials who were Catholic out of a window. It all kicked off, right? Everyone's fighting, everyone's picking sides. Interestingly, though, when the French got involved, because of course they did, despite being Catholic, they actually sided with the Protestants, and they supported the Protestant campaigns. This is really significant because their money would finance almost all Protestant campaigns going forwards. So you might be like, okay, hold on there. This war's about Catholics and Protestants. Why did the French side with the Protestants? Well, if you look at this map that's on screen, you'll see that France there is surrounded by red. You've got the Spanish Netherlands, ruled by Habsburgs, or to the north. You've got northern Italy, ruled by Habsburgs, to the southeast. To the east, you've got the Holy Roman Empire, and the principalities just to the east are Catholic and ruled, therefore allied with the Habsburgs. You got the south, which is the Spanish Habsburgs. So they essentially saw them as their main threat and their main rival, and they saw this as an opportunity to try and bring them down. Now we're 10 years into the 30 Years' War. Okay, so we're a good chunk of the way through. The Catholics at this point have pretty much won. They've beaten the invading Denmark, pushed them back into Denmark. The emperor at this point is running out of finances to recruit soldiers. So instead, the way he recruited soldiers is by giving them official permission to pillage and loot whatever they wanted along the way. The legal right to go and do that. The French decided they're going to shift finances. Instead of funding the Danes, or Denmark-Norway, which did a bad job, they're going to start funding Sweden. And as I said before, and I won't double up on it, but Sweden was considered a bit of a backwater at the time. So everyone was like, Sweden? Like, Sweden? Like, what were they going to do kind of thing, right? See, Sweden actually was Protestant, as I mentioned at the beginning. And under Gustavus II, Gustavus Adolphus, were pretty damn significant. They would show up and they would do considerable things. They would rock up to the north of Germany, land in, I believe, Prussia on that map there, and they would immediately use French money to hire 40,000 mercenaries. I use that. Yeah.
Jesus, that's a lot of money they must have given them.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And this is not their own really well-trained troops. These are 40,000 Germans, like Protestants. So I think I don't often use numbers in my stories, as you can tell, but I wanted to use that one because sometimes when someone says we hired some mercenaries or whatever, I think of like a few hundred dudes, you know? Oh yeah, a few hundred guys here, a few hundred guys there. We are talking in the tens of thousands, and 40,000 is a lot. But like the Emperor's side, the Catholic League, I believe they're called, the Catholic League had about 30,000 mercenaries, right? Like we're talking the tens of thousands. Yeah, what are you gonna say?
This is like in Lord of the Rings, where he's like, you couldn't take that keep not with thousands of men. What about tens of thousands? Swore that we're kind of. That's how I'm imagining them with the like Germans, angry Germans.
Yeah. Or just go to a modern day football match, and you know you'll get to see that in action. So there was a lot more fighting. There was a lot more plundering. And during this time, I just thought I'll make a special mention of the Finnish cavalry, of course, fighting for the Swedes. They distinguished themselves as highly effective. And at this point, I'll also say that while in Age of Empires 3, you have the option to do something called revolutions, where you can stop playing your country and turn into another country. And Sweden has the option to have a revolution and become Finland. And we've decided that we're also going to cover the revolutionary countries as well, because we thought that would be cool at some point. So if you want to see that, subscribe for or follow the podcast for future Finland episodes. Eventually, at somewhere called Leipzig in Germany, Gustavus Adolphus was killed. He shot 3 times and fell off his horse. It was the Swedes still won the battle, though. I thought, before I move on, that's important to say. The Swedes did still win, but losing Gustav was such a huge sort of... It was just massive. It was massive. And considering how much he'd done for Sweden up until this point, the Swedes' enthusiasm for the war just completely faded. And in fact, it faded so much that it was a German mercenary that ended up taking command as well. So that the Swedes themselves, they were done. Like, even though they won, Gustav, the Lion of the North, as he became known during the 30 Years' War, by the way, I'll say, because he won so many battles, like just win after win after win after win. This guy was racking them up. The Protestants were definitely winning at this point by quite a lot. For reference, we're now 20 years into the 30 Years' War. 20 out of 30. All right? So there's more fighting, more horrible times for average Germans. And eventually, the Swedes, they are defeated by some Spanish forces that were, of course, supporting the Catholics, as I mentioned, Spain and were Catholic at the time. And so there was a lot of switching sides. Even Saxony flipped to the Catholics. They tried to block their old ally, the Swedes, as they were trying to exit the country. They were trying to flee back to the north to get out of there. They were done, and people tried to block them. They won that fight as well. Still got out. So they were still doing pretty well, even with the lessons of the late Gustav.
That's the thing is, if the tactics are there and there's still going to be other generals who got strength, it will still, you won't immediately go, oh, we've lost the general, everything's gone, because if all that kind of rigor that's put in place still exists, like the training that they did will still exist.
Yeah. So there's a lot of switching sides, as I mentioned. Some Protestants fled to France. Most tried to reconcile with the HRE. A new peace was signed, and it was much like the first one, whose realm, their religion. And that's 20 years of war. And as I know some of our viewers are younger than us, that's your entire lifespan, right? And I know you're thinking, well, 20 years, I thought it's the 30 Years' War. Yeah, it's not over. there's still more. 20 years of war, and it's still not over, right? So it would be such a neat way to wrap up the story. Except France at this point were like, all right, you know what? If you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. So they invaded themselves. They went straight into the Spanish Netherlands. There was so much happening here that I'm not going to cover in great detail because it doesn't involve the Swedes until a little bit later. But yeah, they got involved directly. They invaded the Spanish Netherlands, northern Italy. Spain fought them back, invaded back into France, almost got to Paris. The Germans from the Catholic League, the Habsburg monarchy, the HRE, they joined in as well. Then, just when you think it's going to go badly, Sweden's back, baby! They come back, they invade again from the north, so the Germans have to turn around, run back, defend the same lands that they've been fighting over for so many years now. Then this is the bit where I mentioned at the beginning, the Swedish, French tag team, Super Smash Brothers jumping in here, just taking names, winning after winning. Of course, there's also like some other stuff going on here, like France invades Spain directly at some point. There's lots of stuff happening all over the place. Okay. And eventually, like, France and Sweden were moving across all of the HRE territories. They even met up a few times, had a few duo fights. I just want to talk about how crazy this is. Remember, this is a Catholics versus Protestants war, and we now have a Catholic-Protestant alliance, like
alliance.
Fighting.
Yeah, they're so illogical in this war.
Yeah, fighting together on the same battlefield against Catholics. It's all politics at the end of the day, isn't it? I don't know. And then they end up absolutely.
Well, that's the thing, is I sometimes feel like the religion is an excuse to do a thing that they already wanted to do. Oh, we want to invade your country. What's the reason? They're the different religion. Yes, that's the reason why we'll invade.
Yeah, and so, while everyone's distracted, Portugal gets independence. Thought I'd throw that in there. We'll cover that when it's Portugal. There's so much happening, right? And then Ferdinand III, that's right, there's who's the emperor at this point? It's gone on for that long. We've got a new one. Ferdinand III requests peace. This drags out. Both sides think that they can get more territory if they drag out the peace talks. But eventually, 30 years later, it is over. And the Swedes, they've gained more territory than they started with. Is generally speaking a massive success. If you look at, had a list of their battles, and honestly, it was like victory, 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 loss, victory, 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 and then there's one like indecisive, like it was like a draw kind of thing, victory, victory, and then towards the end they did lose a few, but yeah, so it's massively commendable, and that's what put them on the map. Everyone saw Sweden differently after that. They were like, these guys are no joke. These are a world power. And you know what's crazy is, like, during all of that madness, they were even setting up some colonies, which you'll tell us about in a sec. But I'll wrap up here.
One last thing though about Gustavus though, is that when after he died, there was obviously a mad dash to get his body back. Like, it was apparently like some soldiers literally just lost their minds, just be like, okay, there's nothing. Don't ignore the gunfire. Just get get his body back. And then his because apparently the communists appeared to embalm people rather than to just immediately bury them.
Okay.
So he was embalmed, and his wife kept his organs, especially his heart, in a gold box for 18 months with her, because she was mourning and said his heart must remain with her.
Wow, that's
so
medieval.
Yeah, that's dedication as well.
Yeah. But my girlfriend better be doing that with my heart after I die, otherwise she's not a real one, right? So yeah, Switzerland. No, I was going to say like,
Switzerland.
Yeah, Switzerland. I know that's intentional. I didn't get them mixed up. Switzerland and Netherlands also become independent during this war. Like, it is so significant. European history. It's mental. But I just want to say, like, oh yeah. Also, this is considered the point where modern diplomacy begins. Like, now, whether a state was ruled by a duke or a king doesn't matter. From this point onwards, they were seen as just as significant. It's not like, oh, it's just a duke. You know, whatever. Like, we can go in and take that. A lot of things started to change, like, in this war. As I say, the father of modern warfare and the beginning of modern diplomacy. This is kind of like the line where you can consider the next era essentially to begin, or a lot of people do, from what I can see online. And I did just want to make a note that this whole thing genuinely was a catastrophe for Germany. Like, in some places, 50% of people were dead, which is crazy if you think about it. There was famine. It was such hard times for the average Germans. I appreciate,
especially if you also a lot of people died and also looted loads of their stuff, so you have to almost rebuild from scratch everything.
Yeah, again and again and again. Remember, I said a lot of these battle sites are just the same places, right? Just later kind of thing, and it's mental, man. And so, who do you think people blamed for all this? If you're average Joe in Germany, who would you blame?
If you're talking about me personally, or who do I think they blame?
Give me both.
So I think that personally, it's down to the HRE emperor who started it all, who just went, let's.
I'd rather rule a desert than a state full of heretics. You could argue by the end of it, he did rule a desert, but yeah.
Yeah, and it was still heretics, so it doesn't really solve anything.
Exactly, it's still heretics. Yeah.
But who do I think they would blame themselves? You know, it always like someone stupid's going to get the flack. Is some Oh, who is it? Tell me. I have no idea. I have no idea.
Witches. They blamed witches.
Witches.
Yeah, witches.
Oh, is this the start of the German witch trials?
Yeah, so at least
Ah.
I'm not sure if it's that. I haven't actually heard of that. Maybe it's that, but at least in the south, which was more Catholic, there was a lot of persecution of supposed witches. Loads of it.
Germany had the highest proportion of witch trials and deaths.
Wow.
Because the really famous one is the Salem witch trials in America, but they pale in comparison compared to Germany. Like that's one that people know the name of, but that Germany they show them what's what with burning witches.
It's just so crazy to think about, isn't it?
Yeah.
But we'll save that for an episode about Germany or the HRE.
Yeah, I'm excited. I love, it's bad to say it, but I love the witch trials.
you. All
The
right.
history of it.
Yeah. We know you're burning witches in your garden every day. So, somehow during all of this, colonies were established across the globe and the Swedish Empire did get involved. Do you want to tell us about some of these colonies?
Yeah, I'll tell you about a couple. So I'll start with the Swedish Gold Coast. So this was in 1650. So it was under the leadership of a trader. It was called Henrik Karloff. They struck a deal, a treaty with some local chiefs that they called Akan chiefs.
Just to be clear, is this North America?
So no. Swedish Gold Coast is in kind of modern day Ghana.
Oh, West Africa.
So,
okay, yeah.
Yeah. So this is now so they established a fort called Carolusborg, and that is now Cape Coast Castle in Ghana. That's the kind of the modern name for it. So it still exists as a location. So this is it's a modern day Ghana, but at the time this was called the Swedish Gold Coast, and this was they established a foothold and kind of started their kind of Atlantic trade from there. So it traded in Gold Coast, ivory, textiles, and of course in that region slaves. So these were like kind of commodities that fueled the European wealth and empire. But they obviously didn't. Their colony was quite short-lived. This is quite a kind of a trend of their colonies. There's only one that I found that lasted for 100 years, which I won't really go over, but because it was quite boring. They just got given it by France, and then they gave it back to France 100 years later. Okay. It wasn't the most interesting one, so I've kind of left that one. For this one, there was kind of internal power struggles, corporate greed, rising competition, and another thing which is quite common of these is it being taken over by someone else. This wasn't just stopped by locals; it was the Danes this time.
They're old friends.
Yeah,
these two never stop fighting. It doesn't matter where in the world you are. Danes and Swedes are going at it.
So 7 years later, after they've established this settlement, 1657, the Danes seized the fort. They briefly regained it, but by 1663, it was gone. The Danes had the flag had come down, the fort changed hands. So it was the only colony that in the African continent that Sweden ever had, and it was only lasted 13 years, of which part of that was owned by the Danes, anyways. Okay, so this is then New Sweden. So this one I actually find more interesting. This one is if you bring up the image, I'll show you where this was
New
formed.
Sweden.
New Sweden
Sounds very American.
If you, of course, I mean this is America. So there we go. So you can see where I think they were just kind of going on the names of the things around it. So this was, if you're looking on the map, if you can't see this is over Delaware, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. So this was kind of covering those things. So it was along the Delaware River. So it's around, if it helps, where modern day Philadelphia is today. It's kind of around where New Sweden is.
That's interesting. So I heard it's always sunny in Philadelphia, but it's never sunny in Sweden, right? I'm playing. I heard it's actually just as rainy over there, right?
I think so. I think it's not as rainy as the West Coast. I thought the East Coast was a bit drier.
I don't know. I'll stop talking. I don't know enough about what I'm saying. Keep going.
So this again was not very long lived. It lasted between 1630 and 1655, so only 17 years. And the colony peaked at 600 Swedes and Finns. Obviously, again, as you say, Finland was part of Sweden at this point, so it was much the same. So they were trying to compete with the French, the English, the Dutch. So they wanted to form their own colony in the Americas to trade and create tobacco plantations. So there's an important guy in all this called a guy called Peter Minuit. So he was the director of New Netherlands. Maybe that's where they got the idea of the name New Sweden from. So he was dismissed from that position and returned to Europe. So he managed to wrangle himself in with the Swedish government, and then he led this voyage to create New Sweden. And they created it within the already claimed lands of New Netherlands. So apparently, at this, so maybe like trying to get his own back. I don't know. Like he was...
The New World is crazy, so man. This part of history
they got rid of him. So he's like, I'm going to form it within your region.
And that's because this actually why in the game Age of Empires 3, one of the countries Sweden can have a revolution and turn into is the United States. So that would explain that.
Yep. So that little colony over there. So he arrived into the lands. He was there with boats of different Swedes and Finns, mostly Swedes. There's majority Swedes at this point over Finns. And so he then did his first voyage away from New Sweden. So he was the governor of New Sweden. He did a voyage away to do some trading, so to get some supplies to help found the colony. So obviously they came with some initial stuff. So he was going over to the Caribbean to collect some new supplies. And in that very same year of its first founding, he drowned. And they hit a massive hurricane. They lost a load of materials they needed to help set up New Sweden.
That's crazy.
And in essence, this kind of really stopped it from its starting point. So it was then taken control of by the Dutch, then by the British, and then by the Dutch, and then by the British again. But the population actually, interestingly, remained mostly Swedish and Finnish. And apparently, even after it kept getting taken control of, more Swedes and Finns kept on arriving. And even though they had no control of it at this point, the population was mostly Swedish Finnish. It actually eventually became half Swedish, half Finnish. And there was actually now, even today, this kind of the style of building is still kind of almost relevant to this old Swedish Finnish log cabin style.
That's really cool.
Lives on that period.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing in how America has this kind of patchwork of history like that. It's really cool.
Yeah.
My next section is actually it's another war, but I'm not going to go into it in as much detail because it's significant. And it's called the Second Northern War, or the Polish call it the Deluge, which means the Great Flood. Which I think is a really great way to describe it, because it's essentially the end of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, a really great power at the time. When I actually visited Poland, I remember learning about this for the first time. It actually really blew me away. But I'll save that for an episode about Poland, right? It was really interesting. What I'll talk about here is essentially what happened from a Swedish perspective in the mid-1600s at this point. I believe, obviously, as we said, Gustav II had passed in the 30 Years' War. There was a Queen Christina, who I don't believe did very well from what I could see. And then she abdicated. She became Catholic and abdicated, something like that. And then at this point, there was someone called King Charles X, who I think in Swedish is just called Karl. I don't know if it's pronounced Karl or if it's just spelt Karl. I don't know exactly. But Karl X, Charles X, whatever.
Is it a modern rendition of what it's still in that period where they still called it Charles, or would they call it Karl then? That's
good point. I don't know. Maybe someone can tell us.
Yeah.
So with Russia already invading from the east of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, Sweden stormed in from the north, snatched land, snatched loot while everyone was distracted. They made huge early gains. They even took Warsaw. But soon a dogpile formed. Everyone was jumping in on the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. We had Austria in there, Denmark in there, Prussia in there, even the Crimean Tatars in there, right? So and everyone just took a swing at Poland. This war absolutely wrecked them. And this is why, as I said, they call it the Deluge, because it was at the end of them as a power, as a great flood. Everyone came in, everyone poured in and just destroyed them. And Sweden during this was, having a great time. They were all over the place, taking land here and there. That map I showed earlier at their peak. This is the moment. This was that during this time that Swedish Empire reached its maximum territorial extent. But they did overstretch, and they got pushed back by all the players. Essentially, eventually they started directly clashing with Russia because they're both taking lands in opposite directions. And they sort of met, and then it was and of course Russia and Sweden have been enemies since day one, so seemingly, and have fought many times over Finland. Now they're fighting over Poland. Yeah, their brief moment of dominance did lead to bigger conflicts, as I mentioned, with Russia, and that is pretty much how that went down. Is there more I could say? Absolutely, but I used my precious time on the 30 Years' War, which I hope I hope you agree with me was a good choice. Over to you.
So I'm going to talk about then the ending of the what's known as the Swedish Empire and kind of their a lot of their loss of power. So this is again, I'm going to mention another war, but there's other stuff going on right now. So the Swedish Empire at this point, at the kind of the end of the 17th century, was still a massive power. But then there was kind of this cracks began to show, and they had a few major events at the same time, which caused a massive issues. So number one being the Great Famine. The Great Famine was between 1695 and 1697, where basically they were decimated by fruit crops. So I don't know if you know this, but there was in this period a little ice age. Have you heard of this?
I didn't. I thought. You know what? Now that you say it, I almost feel like it kind of rings a bell, but no.
Yeah, so it's apparently massive temperature drops in this period. This is going back to Britain again because I should, but I know this is a point where there were the Thames would freeze over and people would like have markets like on the Thames because it was that cold.
It's interesting because I knew that the Middle Age. I thought that the Middle Ages was going through a period of warming, but this is after the Middle Ages, so I suppose it was an unusual period. This was
the Little Ice Age. It was like a couple hundred years, yeah.
And then I guess it went through a cycle there. Wow.
So so apparently the Great Famine caused by the Little Ice Age devastated Sweden, but particularly Finland. Apparently, a third of Finns died due to the Great Famine.
Man, we got to remember that. We got to remember that for when we're doing the tier list placement, because that is not only do you get war, you then get famine. It's like, oh boy.
Yeah. Oh, but it doesn't end with that. It doesn't end. It doesn't end with that. So, so it had a massive kind of demographic and economic blow because obviously, and at this point, then Sweden was weakened because of this famine, and then it entered into the Great Northern War. So in 1700, only a few years after they've had this massive famine, lost huge amounts of population, they had a kind of this prolonged conflict with Russia, and Russia was a rising power at this point. And then, if war and famine weren't enough, there was then a Great Plague. So another rise of the plague
just
hit
gets
them.
worse and worse.
So between 1708 and 1713, so it was carried along like the same like kind of trade and troop routes that fueled the war. So because the war drove the plague, so it's kind of like this kind of knock-on effect. So the plague then probably swept through these Baltic cities, killing thousands, and then further like sapping Sweden's strength. So they were weakened by famine, they're weakened by war, then they're weakened by plague, and it just like this perfect storm to cause this kind of collapse of this their imperial ambitions, and actually kind of cleared the way for the rise of the power in the east, the Tsarist Russia.
All right,
it kind of became a bigger power after that point.
That's mad. Because I know there's three. So there was the Northern War, which we didn't actually talk about, but like I said, there's loads of war. There's the Second Northern War, which was the Deluge that I did briefly cover. This is the Third Northern War, also the Great Northern War, which was like, oh my god, can it get any bigger than that? It already has been. Like it's madness. It's like every time as I feel like as you go forward throughout time in history, it's like the army sizes just keep getting bigger. We know it's just keep getting it's just crazy. Anyway, and that's the end. So essentially, sorry, is what you're saying that they lost to Russia, and that's why then they
yeah. So they lost land, they lost, and this is
and they lost Finland, didn't they?
Yes, yeah. This is the point where Russia became a much more major power. So they were again, they'd be decimated in so many different fronts that it was almost impossible to keep what they had.
Bonus topics, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, my bonus topic, as you know, is always very loosely related. I try and keep it to the normal people. And yeah, I sort of cheated a little bit. It's not quite about the Swedes of that time period. It's actually about Sweden today. And there's something called the Yule goat. It's like a goat that's made of straw. And I think in the modern day, people put it on their Christmas trees. It's one of those pagan traditions. It's thought to be Thor's goat that pulled his sleigh, I guess. And it's one of the traditions where like paganism sort of merges with Christianity. And one of the things that apparently they do in Sweden is that when they're decorating the Christmas tree, everyone has a goat, the Yule goats that made of straw. They hang it on the thing. Right. And this is my loose connection to this time period. It also continued throughout this time period, and everyone was doing that. And all the way towards the modern day, And at some point, someone had the idea. You know what? In a town called Gävle, I'm not sure. Somewhere in Sweden, someone had this idea that they were gonna create a really big version of this Yule goat, and they'd put it in the center for people to come and look at. You know, like during Christmas time, like people giant Christmas trees up. These guys are gonna put a giant goat up, and I'm gonna put this image on the screen here. And as you can imagine, straw is quite flammable. So on the image on the right there, it is on fire. But you see, this is some crazy. I don't even know if it counts as a tradition. So let me talk about this. The first time it went up was 1966, and almost every time since, someone's burnt it down. I'm not kidding. Like, something has happened to it, and it's not like a fun tradition. It's illegal. You go to prison for it, right? You get fines for it. But people keep doing it. Every year they go and people try and do it. At one year there was an American who went to prison for like 20 days. He said he swore on his life that his Swedish friends told him it was allowed. And then so Sweden being nice let him go without a fine.
How stupid are you? That's surely no one believes that. Oh, my friend said, well, why is it not already on fire then? If it's all right. Look, by the way, just to people who are audio only, this goat looks about 25 foot high.
It's in the Guinness World Book of Records. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, massive.
For what?
I think just world's largest straw goat.
I mean, come on now. How many people are fighting for that one?
I don't know. Maybe Norway is. Maybe Denmark is.
Oh, we got all our Norwegian listeners. Maybe they can tell us about a massive goat in their town.
Yeah. So I wanted to, for my bonus topic, I wanted to read to you the fate of the goat every year until the modern year. And I'm just going to sort of fly through it. Yep. 1966, fire. And then 67 and 68, it survived because they added a fence around it. They've been upping security all the time, right? 69, fire. 70, fire. 6 hours after construction, I had. 71, smashed to pieces. 72, collapsed.
Surely that's going to be noticed, though, if someone smashes it to pieces.
Apparently
like fire, you could do quite sneakily, but like you could like toss something really slyly, but smash to pieces.
Yeah, I don't know. 73, stolen. And I will add that the police found it in some man's garden. He was just chilling. He's like, yeah, I managed to steal it. Well, I think I got arrested 2 years for aggravated theft. This is what I'm saying. And they keep doing it. And people keep trying to do something to this goat. It's super illegal. Don't leave the goat alone. It's a nice Christmas tradition. So then after that, 74, fire. 75, collapsed. 76, hit by a car. 77, fire. 78, kicked to pieces. 79, fire, before it was even been finished assembled, right? So it hadn't even been moved into the square yet where the main people are. Bear in mind, it's been like 10 years now, more than 10 years since this thing has survived a single year. I suppose being made of straw makes it quite flammable. But they've been upping security, right? They start putting cameras up. They start using spraying flammable spray on it, fire extinguisher stuff. And it keeps going. So 1980, fire. 81, survived. That's the first one in like 13 years or something.
All right, nice.
82, fire. 83, legs destroyed. 84, fire. 85, fire. And also, in 85, it was being guarded by the 14th Infantry Regiment.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's still set on fire, right?
Maybe it was them. Maybe it was them who did it.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, 86, fire. 87, fire. 88, it survived. Interestingly, 88 is also the year the English bookmakers are starting to take bets on it. That's right. If you're in the UK, you can take bets and bet money on whether this thing is going to survive or not survive.
I think they should be looking at the people who are guarding it as the ones who may be the prime suspects.
Yeah.
If these people are either crap guards or they should be the ones being investigated. Maybe it's like, the days it survived. Maybe it's like a specific guy who's never there, who's like, oh, he was ill that year.
Everyone keeps trying. Like 1 year it was a Norwegian who came into the country just to burn it down. It's this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's I don't know. I think it's because maybe they do it at night. One of the times it was during the middle of a massive blizzard. They still burn it down. I don't know. So anyway, 89
commitment.
Yeah, fire. 90 survived. And because in 1990 it was being guarded like non-stop by volunteers. Apparently they were like circling it and guarding it. So there you go. 91 fire. 92 fire. 93 survived, and 94 survived, and it also won the Guinness World Book of Records.
2-year run.
It broke its own record for being the world's biggest goat. 95 fire, 96 survived. 97 we're going to call a draw. It survived with damage. So someone tried to burn it down by shooting a firework at it from a distance to because people were guarding it. And it kind of got set on fire, but there's a fire station not far away, and they managed to make it in time this time, whereas in the past they never had, as you can see from the image on the right. And they managed to sort of put the fire out, so there's like some damage. It's a draw. It technically survived, 98 fire, 99 fire, 2000 fire, 2001 fire. That's the year the American from Ohio went and did it. 2002 survived with some damage. So it's a draw, I'd say. 2003, 4 and 5, fire. 2006 and 7 survived. 8 and 9, fire. 10 survived. Again, like I said, at this point now, there's security cameras, there's surveillance, modern day like internet technology, looking after this thing.
Really, I feel like that almost makes you more excited to do it, though, doesn't it?
Maybe that's
the more
why.
Security, the more people want to do it.
Yes, maybe that's why. Honestly, maybe if you're in Sweden right now, let us know. Have you ever done it? Was this one of these years? 2011, 12.
Maybe the Norwegian who set fire to it is listening.
Yeah, 2011, 12, and 13. Fire. In fact, in 2013, the perpetrators filmed themselves setting it on fire.
Of course, we're getting more to the social media age.
Yeah, exactly. 2014, it survived. 2015, 16, fire. 2017 survived, and this is the bit where it starts to get positive. 18 survived with damage. 19 it survived. 20 it survived. I will say this was COVID time, so there was like lockdowns. But it still survived. It counts.
But that made me feel like it'd be almost even easier because there's less guards, surely, because they have the social distance to guards.
I don't know how strict Sweden's lockdowns were. I'm not sure. The 21 fire, 22 survived. 2023 is my favorite one. Technically, it's a draw. It was pecked to pieces by jackdaws. You see, apparently the straw they used that year contained an unusually high amount of seeds. So the birds were just like tearing it apart to try and get to the seeds. So apparently it survived, but like it didn't look like a goat anymore by the end of it because it just been like ripped to pieces. And 2024, which is our last recorded date, it survived.
All right, so taking bets on this year.
Because it's the era of fake news, there was apparently a deep fake of it burning down in 2024. So people thought it did burn down, but actually it didn't. So there you go.
Or maybe maybe it was from the people who make the goat to try and make people think it's so they don't come and try and burn it down.
Stop Americans from booking flights and coming over to burn their goat. Yeah, that's my story, man. Sweden is what a place.
When we get to the end of this year, we'll do an update on whether the goat burned or not this year.
Yeah. Go on, mate. What's yours?
So mine was something I almost actually included in the main body, but I decided to put it as a bonus topic because I went slightly off the rails when I started looking into it. So when I was looking into Gustavus Adolphus, he was 6'2".
Quite tall for the time period, no?
That's my topic. Is it tall for the time period? So you think you go like, everyone was smaller back then? No, actually not. By modern estimates, like this period, the early Middle Ages, people were around the same height as today.
The early Middle Ages or modern ages?
In the early Middle Ages, people were around the same height as today.
Oh.
And then apparently the early Middle Ages, people around the same height as today, and then the average height across basically across Northern Europe after the plague, there was a massive height boom. So basically, because killed off a lot of population, but that meant that there was more food for the amount of population, and also gave people kind of more worker rights and that sort of thing. So
it's funny you say that. Sorry to interrupt you, but in Germany post 30 Years War, one of the things that happened for these half the people that survived is actually their lives improved greatly, similar to the whole English peasant situation after the plague and how their rights improved. I mean, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but like for the people who survived or the generation after, it was all right.
So then you get towards so then Gustavus is the end of this period of where at the point of it started to drop again. So it was the late 1600s when it started dropping again, people's height. And this trend continued until like the early 1800s. And apparently, you think the Industrial Revolution would have helped, and that massively did not help, because it basically meant that there was even more. You think, Industrial Revolution, maybe the workers have less to do, but it massively increased the strain on the bodies of the workforce. So people actually were getting even smaller at that point. So again, it's also come aligned with mortality rates. So if average height is low, mortality rate is normally high. So it's kind of this kind of alignment between the two. So they were having a lot lower mortality after the plagues, interestingly, which meant that there was people were getting taller, and then as it got harder on the workforce, which is why people are taller today, because we have less strain on our bodies from working, especially too young. If you work too young, too early, it reduces your height.
I didn't know that. Yeah. Interesting. Because I always thought the whole lifting weights as a kid stunting your growth was a myth. But then nope. maybe it comes from maybe if you're not lifting properly, if you're in the mines.
That's it. It's lifting weights is not going to damage you. It's not going to make you small.
Yeah.
However, 16 hours days of hard labor, they will stunt your growth. Alongside the improper diet as well. Because again, if your diet's not great, which is why you had this boost in height when the diet improved, because there was more kind of food available.